Yeah, the other day I was working on the jig for the Dovetails, and I was using a thin kerf regular skill saw blade, and that's an alternate top bevel, so it cuts this kind of a shape into the wood. Then I got to thinking that it would be great if I had the correct type of saw blade to cut that 10-degree angle. So what I'm going to try to do in this video is use my little belt sander here to grind this blade into that profile. So I've got my thing set up here. I've got the sander itself clamped down to the bench. I already tilted the table on here to 10 degrees, and that gives me the angle that I need. The table on the sander is not big enough to support something big like this fully. And plus I need to index it through the center hole here so that I can get the teeth all ground to the same size and the same distance from the center. That's very important. So what I did was I cut a strip of plywood here and I spring clamped it to the table, and so that follows at 10 degrees. And then I supported the other end with just a piece of hardwood here, and then I clamped that down to the bench as well. So the whole thing is kind of clamped together and it can't move, or it shouldn't move anyway, while I do this. So the first thing that I've got to do is get this lined up correctly. I need to find the center hole, and all I'm going to do for that is just make a couple of marks on here. I'll mark the leading edge of the tooth here on this piece of plywood so that I can line that up. And I'll also make a mark in the final position for the center hole so that I can grind them all the same. I'll be able to line it up on the tooth and line it up with the center hole, move it ahead until it grinds the tooth down. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grind the first tooth by hand and by eye, getting it right, and then I'll just leave it in that position and I'll make those marks, and then I'll grind the rest of the blade to match. I'll say this now before I get started on the grinding. The dust that comes from grinding carbide is definitely not good for you. You want to protect your lungs at all costs. I'm going to be using my favorite, which is this right here. A lot of people don't think that that's an effective dust filter, but it is actually, because, okay, you hold that up across your face there. Cloth itself is not the best filter material, but the surface area means that you're not pulling air, you're pulling air in with less pressure than you would be for a dust mask that's so small. So you got a small dust mask here, you're pulling the air in harder through that than you would be through a bigger filter, which is my t-shirt. Okay, I think that's far enough. It certainly looks like I reached this other side of the tooth. Now I've got my very fine pencil here. I'm just going to make a mark inside where the hole is that I can line up, and then I'm going to make a mark. I'm going to make a couple of marks actually, so I'll be able to see it better. I'm just going to make a mark on that tooth with a black magic marker, and that way I'll know where I started. Now I'm going to finish grinding the rest of the teeth. Hopefully this belt holds up. You can hear that clicking sound. That's the join in the belt. I used this before to sharpen the blade on my biscuit joiner, and I talked about that problem there. There's a link in the description showing me doing that. Okay, I went around the disc one time, but the problem is this belt wears out pretty quickly, and I was losing grit towards the end. So now I've taken the belt off the machine, turned it around so that the fresher edge is out here, and I'm going to set up my thing here again to give it another pass on the cleaner side. I'm thinking, okay, first of all, the first pass had a lot of grinding to do. This second one will be kind of like a touch-up pass that should finish it off. So I got one more thing I need to do, and I'm going to put the regular belt on there again for that. And that's to grind these little knobs that are on the back of the tooth. These are anti-kickback pawls, you could say. Well, they're limiters, actually. They limit how deep the blade can cut, so it prevents it from kicking back. These have to be lower than the tooth a little bit for the blade to actually cut properly. Now the angle that I'm going to grind these at is 90 degrees, since it doesn't have to match the angle of the tooth. I've got the blade put in the saw. I've got it tilted to the 10 degrees it needs to be. I adjusted the height so it's correct. I've got my jig set up here with a fresh piece in here. Now I'm going to cut a sample and see how well it works. Okay, that was real time. I didn't speed up the video or anything. Very quickly went through this, and wow, is that ever flat across the top of that cut. So that was that way. Now I'm going to flip it over, line it up with the same mark I was on before, and I should be able to cut the other side using the same marks I did over here. Just going to move it back to the start position and get going on the second half of the cut. Oh man, did that ever turn out nice. I'm going to get a picture of that close up. Now there's a little bit of chip out on the back side of the cut, but whenever you're using something like this, you want to have a backer piece in there anyway to, take that chip out. Plus this plywood is pretty splintery on the face anyway. But overall, I'm very happy with the way that turned out. The blade seems to cut fine, doesn't shake the table saw all over the place or anything like that, so I guess the balance is pretty good. Anyway, so that's encouraging for the rest of the build. I've got this to the point now where I can finish designing this jig and know that it's going to work properly.